Hello and welcome to a very special cover story conversation. I have with me Manish Tewari. He's a Congress Lok Sabha MP. He's also former Union Minister, and I think one of the more articulate voices from the opposition. So, Manish, good to have you here in the middle of a very stormy monsoon session, I might add.
Thank you very much, Priya. It's always a pleasure having a conversation with you.
Thank you. In fact, the session began on a very stormy note, and why I'm going to start with the youth protests is, Manish, because we recently did a town hall with the young generation, the Gen Z. And when we asked them who are the politicians of the future, the leaders of tomorrow that you have faith in, your name came up. So I asked them, what do you like about Manish so much? They say because he's the one who works. We always see him in the constituency. He's there on ground, and also the kind of issues you articulate. They say there are issues that are everyday issues, the issues we deal with, especially the education system. You've been talking about the reforms in the education system. So I want to really begin with that first, if we may, on the protests of the youth, what your take on them, and also what needs to be done.
So, Priya, let's rewind back to 12 or 13 years when the lead up to the 2014 Lok Sabha election started. The people who are in power now, the NDA-BJP alliance, they actually promised, especially the young people of India, that there would be Achhe Din. Right? So therefore, the agenda was absolutely religion neutral, caste neutral. It was aspirational that we would deliver a utopia, which according to them, which I do not agree with, that the UPA had failed to deliver. But 12 years down the line, there is a serious problem of unemployment on the ground. Jobs is the single most problem, which is why you have all these protests around competitive examinations being allegedly rigged. Then cost of living has exponentially gone up. Inflation, especially food inflation, is hitting everybody, not only the poor, but even the lower middle class and the middle classes. And what you saw happen on the 20th of July was really a culmination of all these frustrations coming together. And essentially, any government which has been in office for 12 years, there is a level of stagnation which sets in. So, therefore, there was an upsurge. Unfortunately, the government decided to be very heavy-handed in dealing with that upsurge. The use of batons and pellet guns really inflamed sentiments of ordinary people also. And that is when the movement actually acquired a completely organic character with large number of people who were otherwise, well, maybe let's say following the movement or were interested in it, suddenly became very vocal, very active. There are all sorts of stories of how people were ordering food on Zomato and Swiggy and sending it to the protest site. So essentially, what the movement or the upsurge which took place, I think was not only limited to an angst and a rightful angst with the leakage of examination papers, but was symptomatic of a wider sense of frustration, which people have been feeling for a while. And coupled with that, these mass defections, the breaking of political parties, which completely transform and alter the mandate which has been given by the people. I think that was also somewhere in that hot mix. And as someone who has come from the ranks of the student and youth movement, I saw the movement against the Mandal Commission recommendations, which was essentially led by our university and college level leaders at that point in time. These things need to be handled with a lot of sensitivity. which unfortunately is what did not happen. And that's why you have this situation today, with the student protests now breaking out in different parts of the country.
Exactly. We're seeing what's happening in Jharkhand. We're seeing what's happening elsewhere also. But, you talked about the reforms in the education system. It's not just the resignation of a minister. It's not also about paper leaks, really. There is a larger problem at the core of it. And you also say that make the education system perhaps not just road-based, but something that makes you think rather than just mug. I saw some of your columns that you've been writing on all this.
Well, the Indian education system, unfortunately, is broken and perhaps irretrievable. It has to be re-engineered ground up. First and foremost, we must teach our young people, preschoolers, primary schoolers, middle schoolers, high schoolers, how to think. We need to ignite the creative energy among our young people. And we need to essentially incentivize them to challenge conformism. We should actually welcome when they break old molds, and challenge the shibboleths of the past. And therefore, it is only when young people are able to think for themselves, rather than learn from a textbook by rote and regurgitate it on an examination paper, that you will have people who will be able to positively contribute to the betterment and the development of India. And this then extends all the way up. You see, our public universities have become arenas of politics rather than institutions of serious academic learning. You have a difficulty with regard to the fact that your research and developmental expenditure as a country is abysmally low. Then you've got this commercialization of education, all these teaching shops which have proliferated, which are not regulated. So therefore, this is a hydra-headed problem. And that's why it requires a fundamental bottoms-up re-engineering, which was really the subject of the column that I'd written for the Tribune. And therefore, till the time you do not do that, you will not be able to build a future-ready nation. You will not be able to empower your young people to be able to compete with the best in the world, and the best that you have, in any case, leave you, for foreign shores. That's been now the trend going back almost 3 or 4 decades, which is why you have extremely brilliant, talented Indian doctors, engineers, IT professionals, and people from other walks of life, scientists, biotechnologists, who have really done so well in a system that rewards merit. So till the time you do not start rewarding merit and excellence, you will actually build a nation of mediocrity.
Fair enough. I think that's really well said. I do hope they'll listen to you. But I think the Parliament seems to have moved on, Manish. From the youth protests and education, having secured the resignation of one minister and setting up a committee to look into it. The government now wants us to debate other issues, and those are the FCRA bill and delimitation. So a little bit first on both of them. First on the FCRA bill. Why is the Congress opposing it? What is your biggest fear?
See, fundamentally, let me try and address something which is far more deep. I remember when I was in college from 1981 to 1985, when I was doing my undergraduation. In those days, you would go to college straight after class 10, and you didn't have a plus 2. We used to read with a lot of interest and enthusiasm as to what used to happen in Parliament. We used to follow parliamentary debates very closely. I remember many a times, because my late father was in Parliament, I used to actually come to Delhi to sit in the visitors' gallery and to listen to those debates. And then from the mid-1980s, around 1987, this process of disrupting Parliament commenced. And since then, Parliament first went into a slow decline in the decade of the 90s, and then went into a faster decline in the first decade of the 21st century or the 2000s. And then from 2010 onwards, when the entire winter session of 2010, from November to December of 2010, was wiped out on the premise of that spurious CNAG report, which had thrown an astronomical figure of 1,76,000 crores into India's public discourse, Parliament entered a phase of terminal decline. And therefore, disruptions became the rule and functioning became the exception. I think the time has come to seriously rethink the Westminster model as to whether the Westminster model is really working for us anymore. Because till the time your legislative institutions remain gladiatorial arenas for the contest for executive power, or in order to get into executive office, the legislative institutions will not be able to perform, or are rather no longer able to perform their principal function. That is, A, to make good laws for this country, and B, to hold government to account, to speak truth to power. Because when Parliament does not function, what do you speak to? You see, the first Parliament met from 1952 to 57 for 135 days in a year. The last Parliament, the 17th Lok Sabha, met for 55 days in a year, out of which maybe 30 days would have been disrupted, or maybe 50% of it would have been disrupted. And the 18th Lok Sabha is said to better that record also. So essentially, India has become a two-horse democracy, whereby you have the executive and you have the judiciary, where the judiciary appoints its own judges, notwithstanding the memorandum of procedure, after they held the NJAC to be unconstitutional on grounds of it transgressing upon the basic structure of the Constitution. And therefore, legislative institutions, frankly, do not command any resonance with the people. I was looking at the papers today. Today is the 15th day of the Parliament not functioning, and there was no reportage in any newspaper at all about the fact that Parliament has been disrupted. And it is very easy to blame the opposition, but it takes two hands to clap. After all, in this particular instance, what is the opposition asking for? All it is asking for is a statement from the Home Minister as to what happened on the 20th of July, 2026. See, as the minister in charge of that administrative remit, you do have a moral responsibility to report to Parliament as to what has happened. Nobody's asking for the Home Minister's resignation. And therefore, what I'm saying is that a process which commenced in the middle of 1987 has now reached an inflection point whereby Parliament, is, for the lack of a better word, becoming completely redundant, if not irrelevant. And if you increase the strength of Parliament to 850, as it is what is proposed in the Delimitation bill, then Parliament doesn't function at 543. How do you expect it to function at 850? Coupled with that, your legislative assemblies are much worse off. Your legislative assemblies, leaving aside one or two states, barely made for 1 month in an entire year. So the will of the people, as reflected through the election of their representatives and sent to Parliament, no longer is reflective or gets reflected in the national discourse or in policy making or decision making. And this is really the crisis of the Indian democratic system, which no one is prepared to address, much less talk about.
But the government is very keen to push the bill. So, in terms of, they are saying we will try and get equal representation, try and bring in the South rather than leave the South out. That's the fig leaf that's being offered. I'm going to take a break and come back and continue the conversation. Hello and welcome back to a cover story conversation. I have with me Manish Tewari, Lok Sabha MP, former Union Minister, and we were just talking about Parliament. And you made a good point, Manish, as to how the Parliament is already not functioning. So doubling the strength is just going to make a bad situation worse. Then why is the government so keen on it? What is the rationale? What have you understood from that?
Well, first of all, I have not been able to understand a couple of things. Let me flag it for you. If you want to provide 1/3 reservation for women, the Women's Reservation Bill has already been passed. The Women's Reservation Bill was supposed to come into play, if I remember correctly from the top of my head, after the first census post 2026. Presuming if you do not want to wait for the census, you can reserve 1/3 of the seats in the existing legislatures for women. And why only reserve them then in the Lok Sabha? You should reserve them in the Raj Sabha also. You should reserve them in the legislative councils also, so that women find representation everywhere. Right. Number two, you see this, if you increase it by 50% across the board, what happens to the fundamental principle, the kernel of Indian democracy, which is enshrined in Article 81A2, if I remember correctly from the top of my head, that the principle of delimitation will be one person, one vote, one ballot. So when you give that a complete go by and arbitrarily decide that there will be a 50% increase, what happens to that fundamental principle that every person will have a vote, and depending upon the number of electors, the seats would be distributed inter se among political parties? And number three, what is the rationale of doing a delimitation based upon the 2011 census in 2026? That is 14 years down the line. I mean, it defies all logic and all common sense. So I do not understand why they are so adamant on pushing this bill through. In any case, once the census happens of 2026, the freeze which was there, which was perpetuated first by the 42nd Amendment of the Constitution in 1976, which froze the number of seats in the Lok Sabha and the legislative assemblies till 2001, and then extended by the 84th Amendment to the Constitution till 2026. And simultaneously, it provided that the inter se adjustment of seats within the states, keeping the whole number as it is, would be on the basis of the 2001 census. So you can wait and you can do it on the basis of the 2026 census once the numbers are in. But fundamentally, if you are going to increase the strength of Parliament to 850, with Parliament meeting only 55 days in a year, out of which 30 odd days go in disruption, you have essentially rendered the legislative institutions completely irrelevant. It will become like the National People's Congress of China.
Very valid arguments, I must say. I mean, I also am perplexed as to why they're doing this, but I'm sure being Amit Shah, he has reasons that will emerge at some point or the other. But what about the opposition? Will you hold? Because the one reason he's going ahead is that he's confident of breaking the opposition. He's confident of DMK's support, of NCP, Sharad Pawar's party breaking.
Well, I do not know, but I do I do recall, because it had popped up on my Google alerts, that one of the right-wing publications had a long-form piece, which essentially made the argument that the number of seats that the UPA won, which went up from 145 in 2004 to 206 in 2009, was a consequence of the delimitation which took place between 2005 and 2008, the Justice Kuldeep Singh Committee. But that's a completely erroneous read on the situation. You see, the Indo-US civil nuclear deal, which was esoteric in character, but because of this honeymoon between or this affection or attraction for the United States of America that is intrinsic to the Indian middle classes, the Indian National Congress won every urban seat from Thiruvananthapuram till Jammu in that election. So therefore, I think if that is what they are thinking, that delimitation helped the Congress to increase its tally between 2004 and 2009, and therefore a delimitation will work to our advantage. I think the fundamental premise of that template is completely flawed.
But supposing the bill is introduced again and is defeated again, won't that be a big loss of face for the government?
Well, I think more important than the loss of faith is that somebody or people in government need to sit back, take a deep breath and think that whether this delimitation, if it is carried out and the number of seats are increased, what would its implications be on the institution itself? And if the argument is that a member of parliament cannot service a constituency which is 30 lakhs or which is 25 lakhs or bigger in some cases, that is neither here or not there, because no member of parliament has an infrastructure to even service a constituency of 5 lakhs.
Correct.
There is no infrastructure which is being given by the government to service or by the legislative institution, parliament, to service such large constituencies. In any case, the size of the US Senate has been what it is, possibly going back to 1776 or a little after that. The principal job of parliament is to make laws for the country and hold government to account. If you are having a problem with local government, you need to further strengthen the 73rd, 74th constitutional amendment institutions, and that's why they were given constitutional protection way back in 1993-94. You need to ensure that your state assemblies, your Vidhan Sabhas, meet for at least 100 to 150 days in a year.
So then, I agree with you. Or in other words, also, how do you increase the local connect, the connect of the MP with the constituents? There are, for instance, a lot of MPs are now trying to connect with the youth by talking the lingo or trying to post more reels. How do you connect, back to the connect with the youth?
Well, ultimately, I think it's a question of connecting across the board. Raise issues which are relevant to the concerns of the largest section of your constituency, and therefore, rather than getting episodical and trying to connect with A section or B section, you need to raise those larger issues in an effective manner, whereby your constituents understand that your member of parliament is sensitive to the concerns of the constituency, and that is where the anti-defection law has been the biggest impediment, because it did not stop defections. Defections went from a individual activity to a retail activity, and now has become a mega mart activity. But what it has done is that it has taken constituency, common sense, and your conscience out of parliamentary and legislative deliberations, because every legislator is a slave of whip-driven tyranny. And therefore, under those circumstances, it's correct that the party gives you the ticket to contest an election, but ultimately, it is the people who elect you. So your first responsibility is really to the people.
So you would rather the parliament looks at the Anti-Defection Act and not go in for this whole process of delimitation?
This increasing in size of the parliamentary institutions will spell the death knell of legislative democracy in our country, because not only parliament is going to be extended, But along with that, legislative assemblies are
Yeah.
also going to be reconfigured. Once legislative assemblies get reconfigured, there will be a demand to reconfigure the Rajya Sabha also, make the Council of States bigger. And so therefore, where do you stop then?
And where is the money coming for all this?
Precisely.
Is the other question. But Manish, thank you. It is indeed a worrying note, and I'm glad you flagged it off, because these are concerns that everybody is actually talking, on the streets, in the drawing rooms, that what exactly is the government trying to do? Is it just trying to change the narrative, or is there some larger game at play? Or as you said, maybe they think they're going to win elections if it increase the number. I don't know how that's going to work, but anyway, let's hope for the best and hope some sense prevails. But on that note, Manish, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you very much, Priya, for having me. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the Newsx YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.